And good evening, everyone, and welcome into the large program Tigers Tonight. I'm your host, John Maddox, joined as always by the best co-host in all the land, Brian Moss. Larry Marley is on assignment, as we like to say, and also with us tonight, one of the newest members of the Tiger Sports Report team, Sam,
Hey, John.
University of Memphis. Sam, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, John. How are y'all?
We're hanging in. We're hanging in. Our northern office, the northern branch of Tiger Sports Report, Brian Moss. Brian, how are you this evening,
Uh,
sir?
I'm doing pretty good, man. The cold weather's rolling in up here. It's in the
Oh,
40s. Thursday night is like 38 degrees. Mwah, I love it.
yeah. We actually, here in Hernando, we got down to 48 last night. So the weather today was perfect. It was like
Yeah,
upper mid 70s, nice breeze.
yeah.
All right, so let's get into it. Busy show tonight. So obviously Memphis at South Florida, for those who don't know, got pushed back a day. Uh, right now they're looking at Saturday. We will actually have Erik from MemphisWeather.net on at 7:20 to talk about what could possibly change with that. And of course, Hurricane Milton was out. We were off last week, so all our thoughts and prayers, of course, going out to the victims of Hurricane Helene a couple of weeks ago. Just a horrible situation over, especially in the Carolinas, North Carolina and East Tennessee, and also with Milton, because he is going to be, unfortunately, I think, one for the record book. So let's get into it. I had some stuff going on. I didn't really get to watch Memphis's 24-7 win over Middle Tennessee State. Sam, you were at the beautiful Simmons Bank Liberty Bowl Stadium. Let's get your thoughts first on what you saw Saturday.
I mean, it was a rainy game. Just the vibes were weird, even from the first quarter. That was in the press box. Everyone described the game as boring or weird or bizarre. I kind of shared that sentiment. It was you're coming off the hangover of the Navy loss, and then you have a bye week right after it, right? So you're playing an inferior Middle Tennessee squad, and it's Kobe Drake fumbles in the first quarter. You have that bizarre end zone touchback play. Things just felt weird. But coming off the Navy game, Memphis fans and also media, me included, we managed to remain optimistic that Memphis can make the college football playoff. That's what we talk about. I'm sure y'all talk about that every episode here, college football playoff, and because that's the goal, right? That's the goal that Silverfield coaching staff and the players have set for themselves. And this game was indicative that this team is not what it was set out to be. Essentially, the talent is there. We all know that. I'm not denying the talent. It's just a 24-7 win. Sure, the defense showed up, but the offense just wasn't clicking. It feels like all season Seth has been a little off within his timing and his accuracy to his receivers. I'm not in on those meetings. I'm not fully sure what the play calling is, but it sure did feel like his timing and accuracy has just been a little off, and it really showed there. Memphis needs to hit the explosive plays more, especially than they did against Middle Tennessee. Silverfield always talks about it. He's kind of like we just take what the defense gives us and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you have to have explosive plays. This offense was advertised as a top 20 offense in the nation. You got to hit those. And there's been some drops. There's been some blocking assignment errors, but yeah, got to hit the explosive plays. And then one more issue this team has faced is just you're not really seeing much pass rush from this team unless it's schemed, unless it's designed pressure. You're not getting pressure unless it's designed. So Memphis is really missing because you have Kobe Minor in the secondary. He's an alpha corner one, right? You have Chandler Martin and then maybe even Elijah Herring at the second level of linebacker. And those are alpha linebackers, right? But you just don't have that guy up front. And it's really come to hurt this team because the defense still is attractive and there's still a lot of redeeming qualities. And they held Middle Tennessee to 7 points because the attacking aggressive nature, right? But it's like there's just not you're not getting pass rush unless it's schemed, and that just makes everyone else's job so hard. So there's my long-winded answer as to what I saw from Middle Tennessee, and just overall, yeah,
Yeah, and Brian, I kind of got the feeling just kind of watching along that it was just sort of, I described as a chance to have a get right game, which that didn't work. It felt a lot more like a going through the motions game. But all in all, you've got to be proud of the defense bouncing back after an absolutely horrendous showing against Navy. They come back nicely, but first time in his career, Seth doesn't throw a touchdown. Um, what do you see as one of the big problems with the Memphis offense right now?
I wish I could put a finger on it, but Sam's right. It something seems off. Now I don't know if is Hennigan hurt? I don't think so, but it's not clicking like I thought it would click. And it could be just that Navy game broke Memphis. I mean, Memphis got punched in the mouth, and it may take a round or two for Memphis to get back on their feet, because it did seem like the first couple of games that Memphis offense was clicking, and I think I think it's more psychological now after the Navy game. To me, all signs point to Navy just really deflated a lot of the momentum that Memphis had. But it's definitely something, because when you take a look at these stats from last year to this year, I wrote an article about assessing the Tigers at the first bye week. Defensively, everybody knows. I mean, Memphis is better defensively. When you take a look at all the categories, Memphis is better this year than last year. But offensively, scoring offense is down. Rushing offense is down. Passing offense is down. Total offense is down. Third down percentage, that's better. Actually, a lot better than last year. Red zone percentage is better. Your strength of schedule. This is why it's surprising to me that the offense seems to be missing a cylinder here, because last year your strength of schedule was 96. This year it's 111th. It could be just that Navy game. At this point last year you were 4-1. This year you're 4-1, and I think it's because I keep pointing to the Navy game. Most everyone out there had Memphis at this point. They thought Memphis was going to be 4-1, but they thought they were going to lose to Florida State, not Navy. So, yeah, like I said before, I think it's all psychological right now. And, I was very surprised that how lethargic it seemed to be during the MTSU game, because this was a ripe game right there for the taking to really fix everything that went wrong, and it didn't happen. A lot of just mistakes, but it's mental. So Memphis can't afford that going forward. I know the schedule is easy going forward. After South Florida, I mean, there's not too many hard games left. I mean, you do have UTSA and Tulane. That Tulane game is going to be brutal, but you need to get it right before then, because you can't afford a lot of mishaps going forward.
Yeah, looking at the stats, Sam, I think you're onto something about the scheme. You had of your top tacklers, you had nobody on the defensive line in the top half. You had Elijah Herring with Taj with 5, Davion with 4, Kobe Minor with 4. I think you're really onto something there, because you're getting nothing out of the front four. And as Brian will tell you, this has been a continuous problem. I just think this year it's, as you said, it's being covered up a little bit because Memphis is way more aggressive than they've been in the past 2 or 3 seasons. But that's a good find by you, because, to me, I never want to see defensive backs in the top, third of your tackles, because that usually means guys are getting through and whatnot. But so what would, if Sam, if I had to, tie you down and say, what would you say the big takeaway from this Memphis offense and how they've struggled? Where if you just had to throw it, where would you kind of assume or guess where that is?
So where the Memphis offense has struggled, it's just been with this timing thing that they can't seem to get right. Because Cramsey, I like Cramsey as a play caller. I think he's creative. I think he's fundamental, but he's creative at the same time. He gets things done. So it's just the timing with this offense. It might be, a new center, Jacob Likes is gone. It might be so to kind of play both sides of your question, because I know you're supposed to be tying me down, and now I have to answer it one way. I can't tell you what it is. It's just there's just something wrong with it, and it might be we're just taking what the defense is giving us, and we're not being aggressive enough. So to answer your question, I'd say it might be a play calling thing. There might be just too much take what the defense is giving us. That's my best guess.
Yeah, like Memphis has been overly aggressive this year. I feel like they've been, fairly passive, but it's a little concerning if we're having timing issues when you've got such an experience laden team like this, to where, you had guys that came back that frankly didn't have to. Seth came back, and some of the other guys came back, and so you've got a lot of folks back that didn't have to be here, and so you do kind of, Brian, scratch your head a little bit. I think Sam's right. I just feel like Memphis has not been aggressive. I don't on the offensive side of the ball, but that's one of the things that I told people they were going to have to adjust to with Coach Silverfield. Different than Mike, and even different from Justin. Memphis is going to win ball games differently if Coach Silverfield has his way. Gone are the days of Memphis going out 63-56. Like that's just not in his DNA. And Memphis fans, I think it's very difficult to pinpoint, Brian, what, kind of, and here we are, we're 4-1 and we're complaining, but
we're complaining about a 24-7 win.
Right. This 4-1 feels different from last year, because I just think that Navy game just took the wind out. Not just that Memphis lost, because go back and watch tape, that wasn't a surprise to me at all. I called it a trap game from day one, but I think the manner in which they lost. So, Brian, to you, how does Memphis get that back?
To me, throw in some new wrinkles. Be a little bit more creative, I guess, in the offensive play calling. And I mean, it also could be that, look who you're playing. You don't want to throw, you don't want to give the conference opponents, something extra or something new to look at. You want to save that newness for the conference games. So in my opinion, I think this is the game to where Memphis should be able to, throw some things out there that, frankly, that teams haven't seen before. I mean, you've heard, Silverfield say, I think it was at the Navy game, that Navy did stuff that they've never done before. Memphis needs to start doing that. It doesn't have to be a whole completely new offense, but some plays. Just throw a wrinkle in there, maybe the same set, but, run different plays out of those sets. I just think they got to mix it up a little bit more, to give the defensive something else to think about. It could be that Memphis is being, a little bit too predictable. I don't think it's that, only because like I'm with Sam, it's a timing issue, and it's a mental thing. I think Memphis really needs a game that, and that's why I was hoping it would have been against MTSU, but you just dominate. Because if the players can change that mindset to, like, hey, we can dominate. We did dominate. It could just, catapult for the, going forward. But it has to be, you got to start doing something. Because it's just, you can't be lethargic like this, going forward, because even teams like North Texas, they have some playmakers that can surprise you, and you don't want to let those teams hang around. You give those teams hope, they can beat you.
Yeah, and Brian, you talk about adding in new wrinkles and stuff, and how Navy, I think Silverfield said 16 or somewhere around that, new like looks that they hadn't seen on film. that's the blessing of coming off the bye week, right? Navy came off the bye
Yeah.
week against Memphis, and then now Memphis is coming off the bye week against South Florida, who is also coming off. Well, never mind. They had the bye week before this Tulane game. And then one more thing before we get to our next segment is Memphis fans and people in general, I think, take for granted how good Blake Watson was, and also take for granted how good Sutton Smith is, right? Because we talk about how there's these timing issues, whatever. Seth Hennigan didn't have to have timing; he could just dump it down to Blake Watson, right? Like, there's not.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the dramatic version of it, right? But it's Blake Watson was an awesome talent. You know, he was 24 years old. He had 4.39 speed. He was a former receiver. Like, he did everything. He could run between the tackles. He did everything you could have wanted him to do at this level. And yeah, and also Sutton Smith's injury going down, that also, I think, is affecting some of it. So that's probably the problem with the offense.
And then Greg DeRosier, being injured. So yeah, it did hinder Memphis a little bit. And when you look at the stats, I mean, Blake Watson at this point last year had 473 yards. Mario Anderson had 442. I mean, there's not much difference. Anderson had averaged 5.8, and Blake Watson averaged 5.9. So I mean, there's small differences, but it's that small differences that will come back to haunt you.
What does Larry talk about all the time with the problem with Memphis? The little things, attention to detail. And we'll look ahead to South Florida here in a moment, but as you're looking in here, Memphis still has to play, as you guys said. North Texas is just lost at the number 15 offense in the country. So Memphis is going to have to put up some points. Memphis is going to have to, do things here and get right offensively. Just get right offensively and figure out what in the heck is going on. So we'll turn it over back the other way, Brian. If you could pinpoint a problem right now with the Memphis defense, what would it be?
I don't think there's much wrong with the Memphis defense. I think they just had a terrible game. They were just, Navy came out and just smacked them in the mouth, showed them obviously some new sets they haven't seen before, and it just took them a little bit to recover. By the end of the game, Memphis, had the defense, figured some things out. But they went into the MTSU game and got things fixed. So to me, the Memphis defense, you don't have to fix a lot. But you do want more pressure on the quarterback. If I had to pick one thing, you want to get a little bit more pressure on that quarterback.
Sam?
I mean, yeah, I already talked about it. And I don't think. I like Brian's point of this defense is a good defense. They were unprepared, had a really bad game against Navy, but overall, it's definitely a good defense. And I talk about how we need a true elite alpha pass rusher. That's at this point in the season, that's probably not going to happen, right? We've seen what we've seen out of these guys, and in this, yeah. So it's a pass rush that isn't schemed. You want to be able to rush for and actually get pressure, but I'm not sure how realistic that is at this point in the season.
Well, I wanted to have a special guest here tonight. He is the MemphisWeather.net, provides all of our first forecasts, but an especially challenging one this week. Welcome in Erik Procius to the program. It's been a while since we've had you live. How are you this evening, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well, John. You guys hear me okay? It's the first time I've been in this platform.
Great. So kind of talk us through, this is actually, oddly enough, it was 2017, we faced a similar scenario in terms of weather. With a hurricane coming in, we had a game scheduled at Central Florida. We got down there, they sent us back home. So what's the latest on the outlook for Tampa for this week, later this week?
Yeah, it's really not looking great for sure. Kind of been tracking the storm for several days, and the forecast track that the National Hurricane Center came out with initially before this storm really got going way down in the southwest Gulf of Mexico kind of pointed at somewhere around the west central Florida region, and sure enough, it's bearing fruit. That's the direction that it's headed. I think the surprise out of this one, we knew there was potential in the Gulf to create a pretty big storm, but this one has kind of exceeded all expectations on the bad side. I think it's setting records for low pressure in the Gulf of Mexico, for maximum winds that topped out last night at 180 miles an hour, Category 5, which is only 10 miles an hour lower than the all-time record in the Atlantic Basin. So it certainly has got all the energy behind it to continue to remain strong. And the forecast track that came out this afternoon at 4 o'clock, there's only a very slight change to it. It was pointing right at Tampa Bay, which is almost a worst case scenario for West Central Florida. It has shifted just a little bit to the south, but 36 hours out, that still is uncertain exactly where it's going to go. But it does look like it's going to make landfall as probably a Category 4 storm, which is for that region coming from this direction is going to be devastating for some area wherever it ends up going, and it's going to cover a wide swath of Central Florida. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but it does not look good at this point.
So it is picking up some forward speed, so it should probably pretty much be out of there by Saturday, maybe some lingering showers. Yeah. But, my concern are power outages and infrastructure and all that. Not to get weather weenie here, but I guess it's a little better if it goes south of Tampa, because that would keep the surge out of Tampa Bay, which I think would cause a problem. But what does the forecast look like for Saturday?
Yeah, so the storm is going to be moving into Tampa Bay region tomorrow night, and it's going to be moving pretty quickly when it gets there, and will actually pick up speed beyond that. So, really by Thursday morning, that storm is gone. There'll be still a breeze behind it, but by the time we get to Saturday, it's long gone out over the Atlantic. Sunny and 85. It'd be a great day to have a football game on Saturday if it weren't for whatever is left behind, and I expect that widespread power outages, infrastructure damage. There's going to be a lot of flooding around Tampa Bay, even if the storm does shift just south of the bay. It may save them from the 15-foot surge, but a 6 or 7 foot surge is basically what they dealt with Helene just 12 days ago. And there's debris sitting in massive piles around Tampa, just waiting to become projectiles if there's a 100-mile-an-hour wind blowing through there. So I think the call to push it off a day certainly gives them a chance on Thursday to kind of assess, see what things look like, and decide how they can manage it. But the Tampa airport closed this morning, and they will not reopen until they take a look at everything and see that they can get planes in and out of there safely, and they've got people to unload them and all that kind of stuff too. So we'll see how it plays out.
Awesome. Well, Erik, won't keep you very long here tonight. Thanks for joining us, but tell everybody how they can follow you and follow the forecast.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate you having me on tonight, and certainly all our thoughts and prayers go to those down in that area and the other places that it's been a busy couple of months here at hurricane season. So MemphisWeather.net is the brand. Go find us on social media. We're on all of your favorite channels, and the MemphisWeather.net website now doubles as a mobile app as well. So you can go to the website, find some instructions to drop that onto your phone, get your latest forecast every day and current conditions and everything. We keep our social media posts fresh throughout the day, every day of the week, year, month. You'll find us the latest stuff there all the time. So appreciate everybody checking it out.
Hey, thanks, Erik. Appreciate you. Have a great
Appreciate
night.
Erik.
Thanks for the first forecast.
You're welcome.
Erik.
Thanks.
Erik Procius from MemphisWeather.net joining us to give us the forecast. We're going to step aside here for about 10 or 15 seconds, and when we come back, we will have Kelly Quinlan on from USF Insider. This is Tigers Tonight. He is the busiest man that I know in the Rivals Network, Kelly Quinlan. Kelly, how are you this evening, sir?
Good. I'm on the side of I-85 at a gas station because I got hung up in traffic and didn't make it to my hotel room in Charlotte tonight. So fun times.
Yeah, great times.
So you might get a show behind you.
Of course, in Florida. Traffic's been terrible. It's I've got friends
so
that live all through
everyone's
Central Florida.
Yeah, so everyone's kind of migrating out. Yeah.
Yeah, and Atlanta traffic needs no help in that regard. So Kelly, it's been an interesting start to the season for USF. You know, I look back and it's very reminiscent. I'm old, so I'm the only one here that remembers this. Very reminiscent of how Memphis used to schedule in the early 90s. You know, we would go play three big SEC teams, and then by the time we play, we were just absolutely, you know, we were down to 65, 70 guys. And it looks kind of like that's what's trended with USF. So, you know, what's the injury situation look like? You know, how's South Florida trying to get right? And you know, boy, just a couple tough losses, games they're in, and then the doors get blown off. So what's kind of been the MO, and what's maybe been the cause of that sort of falling apart?
So I think the the greatest example of what you're talking about is Rashad Cheney, who was a fifth or sixth year defensive lineman that was a veteran starter for them, medically retired last week in the middle of the season. It's just been kind of brutal for them. Getting beat up, you play Alabama, you play Miami, you play all these other teams, and it just it gets to the point where you can't, you know, you can't withstand that. You're not set up to withstand that. And that's the big thing for them is they've got to get healthy. Byron Brown, their starting quarterback's banged up. He's day to day. I am uncertain if he would play Saturday if they were to play a game. Bryce Archie, who came in behind him, struggled quite a bit. And the bits that he's played here and there and having to play the end of that Miami game really struggled to throw the football with accuracy. Not as dynamic of a runner. So that's a problem. Injuries in the Miami game that really got them. It's just been kind of tough. They've gotten better. They've been really killed by injuries the last few years. This year they've had more depth, so they've withstood it better, but it's still not quite there. And a lot of the scheduling stuff was sort of some things out of their control. Why they had this sort of gauntlet set up, and it's tough. And to be honest with you, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them if this game was not played on Saturday, just in terms of pushing it back and giving them another week to get Byron Brown healthy and to kind of get things situated. There's a lot of people that got wiped out in Tampa. I have friends that lost their house, you know, in the last storm and are nervous about, you know, what's going to happen now. We have people that moved up to Atlanta near us to kind of decamp from it. So I think everyone right now, it's sort of that weird situation of worrying about the storm. And it's funny you brought up, I was listening to you guys bring up the UCF Memphis game, and Georgia Tech, the other team I cover, had their game canceled because of the threat of a hurricane. And then obviously the deal with Memphis that year too was the same season, 2017. And USF played that weekend that they canceled the Georgia Tech game. They played Illinois. They had one practice that week with Charlie Strong, and they won the game against Illinois in Tampa. Now, as you said, you know, there's things I wonder about just logistically. Like, can Memphis equipment truck get to the stadium? Like, do you have hotels for your guys to stay in? Are you gonna have to fly in and fly out, play a game? Like, there's a lot of stuff that is the sheer logistics of trying to play this. If the storm's as bad as they're saying, just seems unfathomable to me at this point. And I think you push it back, and it's one of those things too. Like, depending on where the teams sit at the end of the year, you maybe try to make it up or you just let it be. And, you know, if they're in the championship games, one of them, then you definitely don't make it up. But I just don't know. I don't know that it's the right thing to play it, especially if things like first responders are being stressed and the infrastructure, people don't have power and stuff. And some of my subscribers were like, hey, they should go play. It'll give people something to do. That's if you can get out of your neighborhood, you know, like, can you get down the street? There's a lot of bridges between a lot of these people in the stadium. Like, there's kind of two roads in and out of there. It's not, if you're trying to come from St. Pete, that can be really difficult. That all got messed up really badly in the last storm. So I think this is a lot bigger than football at the moment for everybody. And it sucks because, you know, all of us get to watch, you get 12 guaranteed opportunities, right, a year. And so it's tough on these kids. They all want to play. But, you know, cooler heads need to prevail here, and they need to be smart about this.
Do you think now I understand why South Florida wouldn't want to do this, but if the conference wants to get the game in, you know, about moving the
Move it up
game
to Memphis.
to Memphis and having Memphis, obviously, pay the expense for South Florida. I know, obviously, Memphis would love that, but I mean, like I said, I can understand why South Florida wouldn't. What is your thoughts on instead of moving the game to Saturday, just moving the game to Memphis?
So it's funny. That was the other thing that came up in 2017 with Central Florida and Georgia
Hmm.
Tech. They offered to have them come to Atlanta. Scott Frost was like, no. And they had a return game, and they ended up being played in 2020 on that with UCF. And they ended up having to play the game back with UCF later in 2022. So, yeah, like, it's, there's teams that play every year. I guess you could double up or just switch the rotation or whatever. But yeah, I guess the whoever's in charge either didn't want to pay for that or just wasn't cool with it. And I think there's some concern about maybe traveling the guys with everything going on. That was the big thing UCF talked about during that storm, was like, we don't want our guys to be away from their families or whatever. Their families won't be able to see them. All of that stuff. I see both sides of it. I think there is some benefit to getting out, and some teams did that. The last couple times there've been storms like this, they'll just go. Like App State right now is homeless. They're just kind of on the road, wandering around, staying places. Valdosta State was at Georgia Tech last week. A lot of these schools just kind of make do, but I think USF's kind of big enough to maybe be like, hey, we don't want to do this to our team. We don't want to go play a road game with, no fan or limited fans, because everyone's kind of scrambling to try to fill up the stadium. So there's no good way to do this. I guess they're trying to get the game in. I honestly thought it made more sense to even maybe push it to Sunday, just put it on ESPN Plus or whatever. And I guess they didn't want to do that. So I'm not real sure what the league's leadership is. Not always impressed me with their ability to be forward thinking in things, as we all have learned over the last couple months. And I think that they got to figure this out though, because these are two of probably your top six teams in the conference. Like, no matter which way you slice it, they should be playing this game. It's one of
Yeah.
it sucks because it was like a marquee TV game for both schools, and you're losing that now. You had Friday night where you were one of the few things on, and now you're going to be on whatever ESPN Plus and a stacked day of college football, which sucks.
When I look at the South Florida team, there was a lot of fanfare coming into this year. The recruiting was well done. The transfers that was coming in, he had some studs that came in. How surprising is it to you that there has been some struggles, especially to me? I think on more on I don't know, maybe you have a different opinion, but from the outside looking in, I thought there was more troubles on defense than offense. Do you see it that way?
So what I've seen is there's sort of two things that have been killing them, and I talked to Alex Golish about this after the Tulane game. They're really struggling off their opening script of the game, which is usually the strength of most teams, right? Like, these are your 10, 12 plays that you feel really confident about going into the game against the defense. You go down march. They've gone 3-and-out, not put up points, and then fallen behind 14-0. And I think the last two games, and had to play from behind, and you can't do that against Miami. They were able to get away with it against Southern Miss and come back and outscored them like 49-10 or something the rest of that game. But like, they're getting behind, and then that puts so much stress on their defense. Their defense doesn't play well from behind. And that has sort of been the MO, and they're just not really there. They're still rebuilding that defense. The offense is not quite, like, they're missing maybe a playmaker on the outside, a receiver. Brown has struggled to throw the football this year a little bit, which has been kind of a disappointing thing for a guy that had really high expectations going into the season. And so I think that they've got to figure out how to start faster. I think that'll make a huge difference. And when they have played well and the offense isn't turning the ball over, the defense tends to play better. And when the offense is moving the football at all, the other problem they have is they go at that breakneck speed. So if you do go 3-and-out, you've given your defense 45 seconds, 2 minutes of real time or 3 minutes of real time, unless there's a TV timeout to reset. And that kills teams. And all of us that have watched teams with spread offenses for the last 10, 15 years in college football see this all the time. You get the head coach, who's an offensive guy, can sometimes put his defense at a disadvantage by trying to do what he thinks is the right thing to do. But ultimately maybe needed to throttle back. And so it's a combination of things. They just haven't been really consistent offensively. And I think that's dragging the defense down. They've had a few key injuries. Rashad Cheney, they're starting Mike linebacker. Jalen Schuler's played like 10 snaps in the last 3 or 4 games. Um, they have some key injuries in some key spots, but I think they've gotten a lot better. This is a much better team than it was a year ago. The schedule's been a little bit harder, so that's kind of where it gets tough to figure it out.
Go ahead, Sam.
So Memphis fans know a lot about Byron Brown, right? And just this offense as a whole, you talk about how it's struggling. What can you mainly attribute that to, other than just the foot, like, because Byron Brown's been struggling to throw the ball accurately. Sean Atkins, other than that Miami game, has maybe been disappointing. What have you attributed just a disappointing offense to?
I think teams have really keyed in on Sean. I think he's not bet he's losing out because of the lack of consistent play from outside receivers. So there's no one they can just kind of key on him, try to bracket him, and then you leave your guys on the island on the other two guys. And so that's been a little bit tricky for him. Brown has just missed so many throws. I mean, they should have been up on Bama by at least a score in that game if he just hits a couple of throws he hit last year. And I'm not sure what that's about. Like, he just is not throwing the football well. And they talked about it and had a lot of discussions, and they've tried to do things to get him going with like the screen game or quick passing game. But it's mostly the intermediate and the deep shots that he's missing, and that's disappointing for a guy that's a veteran quarterback that they're really excited about, that has all this talent, that for whatever reason, I don't know if it's injury or just mental, like getting in his head a little bit on the throws and not just following through. I don't know what it is, but he hasn't played up to the standard, and he's been dynamic in some run games, but he got kind of banged up, and now he's been less dynamic in the run game. And so that really puts them behind the sticks when he's not running the ball well.
Yeah.
Then you compound that with the inability to pass, and that puts a lot of pressure on their running backs, and they don't run block great. And so it's sort of this domino effect. But they have enough talent there to figure this out. I just think they haven't quite put it together yet for whatever reason.
Yeah, and you talk about Byron Brown, how he hasn't been hitting these throws or whatever. And then also, he's day to day. We're not sure if he's playing in the backup quarterback. What's just the scouting report on him? You say he's struggled to make some throws, but what's his high school background? What have you just seen from him in your
So
time?
he's got a big arm. He pitches for the baseball team and actually pitches pretty well. Big
What's his name
arm.
again?
Bryce Archie. He was at where was Bryce at Coastal, I think, Coastal Carolina, and he transferred in. And it was either Coastal or Charlotte, it was one of those two. But Bryce transferred in and came in and kind of solidified a backup spot. They weren't really sure what he would be. There's a young talented guy named Izzy Carter that was one of their top signings. He was committed to a Pac-12 school at the time, flipped to USF, came and signed. And Izzy's a little bit more like Byron Brown, a little more dynamic. Archie's can run okay, but he's not as good at running as Byron Brown. He's a little more of a vertical passing guy. And so it's a lot different with him. And when you got guys who maybe aren't making plays downfield, that kind of compounds it. I think also with Bryce, they have to change their game plan a little bit. That's where you get into the weird things when you have quarterbacks that have different skill sets. You have to tweak what you're doing, so that can be difficult in a game. So I'd be curious to see if they know, Brown wasn't going to play. Do they scheme differently for Bryce Archie and see what he can do? And they obviously know what his throws are. They made him the number 2 guy, so they have some confidence in him. It just hasn't quite shown up in the bits and bobs he's played this year. But again, they've been kind of out of it by the time he's come in the game, or it's been mop-up duties like at Southern Miss. So it hasn't been the best opportunities for him to come in and play.
So let's move off the field. Just a couple of questions about that. So new era of college football, with NIL. How is South Florida, do you feel, positioned in that crazy world of NIL?
So that's an interesting topic. This is something I bring up that sometimes will anger some South Florida fans, but it's sort of the reality of seeing this from a lot of different angles. I've covered lots of different programs at different levels. So South Florida, Central Florida, schools like that started football 20, 30 years ago, or were playing at a lower level 20 or 30 years ago, that are in an area where there's other big programs, like they're surrounded up to the north by Florida State and Florida, and to the southeast by Miami, right? Those programs, a lot of their alumni grew up fans of those other schools, right? Because that was the big time football when they were in school. The people that have disposable income to spend on things like NIL, that are wealthy, in their 60s or later, right? Those are the people bankrolling a lot of these NIL programs. So those programs have to be more creative in the way they put together their money, how they do things, and there's no real obvious, like there's no FedEx, right? Like that's down the street from USF either, that's dumping money into one program or another. So you have to be creative with how you raise money. They've done a nice job. They can punch above their weight in the league in terms of their money and what they have. I think that if you look at what they're doing, I think it's pretty impressive. But is it the amount of money that they need to, or whoever? No. And so they got to keep building upon it. But again, it's one of those things, in a few years, as those people that grew up watching Jim Levitt football or whatever start to hit those points where they have some disposable income that they're willing to invest in this, then I think you can start to pick it up a little bit. But that's the difference between, like, Arkansas and Central Florida, or Kentucky and Louisville and Western Kentucky or whatever. Like, there's just the amount of buy-in that you have from people that are used to spending on these programs. And that's the have and the have not piece, and then you get into the TV money and all the other things. And the one thing that USF does have is they have a huge student body, so I think that helps them a lot. And I think that if they continue to win, they're building an on-campus stadium that'll be big. I think they're finally doing the things they should have done probably 10, 15 years ago. And it's why they're still in the American, sadly, because they didn't do these things and made some poor choices in coaching hires, and kind of lost their luster to Central Florida. And that's like the saddest part of it for USF fans, is they saw this, what was the sister of the poor, kind of hit the runner at the right time at the poker table to get hot, to get into a bigger league by making some smart decisions at the right time. And USF had the opposite, and now they're having to play catch up. And it's an interesting time for all of us, especially, both these programs, both Memphis and USF, are the upper echelon of this and should probably be in a better league, and they're not right now. And so it's frustrating for all of the fan bases. So I imagine that has some impact too when you're out trying to raise money. And it can be a positive impact if you can find a way to push people to want to give. But it can also have a little bit of, there's people that are apathetic about it. Like, my God, USF's playing in a league with Rice and Navy and Army. Like, what the hell has gone on when they were in the Big East, Like, so it is a difficult situation, and not one that I envy Michael Kelly or any of the leadership at USF that they have to deal with.
So you brought it up, and we almost feel obligated to talk about it. It's a lot of hubbub with the Pac-12, and USF was in, and then they were out, and then they were in, and then they were out, and it almost feels like USF is waiting on something else. Because if we're being real, like, USF has no business playing conference games against Washington State. Like, that's just utterly ridiculous. I think it was last week Miami played at Cal, and they traced the Miami equipment truck 2,800 miles or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's insane.
So what's kind of the conference realignment? Obviously, we all want to get better, right? We all want to move up and get a piece of that pie. What's kind of the USF, maybe what they think might be coming down the road that maybe caused them a little bit of pause with the Pac-12 interest?
So the AD at USF worked for the ACC for a long time, Michael Kelly. That's how I knew Michael Kelly, from working in the ACC. Worked at Georgia Tech before that. But I knew him from the league office. Like he was a guy I would run into at all kinds of events, like the thing I'm going to tomorrow, the basketball tip off. And everyone believes that he's going to get them either into the ACC or or a seat at the table if it turns out to be like a, whatever the Super League or whatever you want to call it. If it's 70 teams, Tampa is a big enough market that they feel like they have a shot at getting in there, which is, they'd be team 70, it'd be team 68, 69, 70 in there probably. But yeah, like, um, that's where you've got to be good right now and invest. That's what a lot of these programs are doing. I see it in the ACC with teams are, investing heavily now to position themselves. So when the ball drops at the end of this decade and everyone starts to renegotiate their positions, that'll make sense. What happened with the Pac-12 is the same thing that probably happened at Memphis. You crunch the numbers, they don't make any damn sense. Paying a buyout for years makes no sense. The travel, the additional probably $2 million you'd spend in travel, you're not going to make back on the TV deal. The AAC TV deal is locked in, so it doesn't go down. So, what is the incentive to make $1 million more so you can go to Corvallis and play them, or go to? Anyone been to Pullman, Washington? My mom got offered a job when I was a kid at Pullman, Washington. She worked in the university systems, and she literally was like, "We will not move there because I will not do that to you, my child." So, I think that as cooler heads have prevailed in this for the moment, but we've seen a lot of stupid conference movements, so you never know. I just think if you're Memphis or USF or Tulane, you're just like, this is not worth. Maybe if you make $1 million more a year in income, is that worth it to you? Because your fans are going to be pissed. They got to go and they're not going to travel to a lot of these places. And what happens when you have baseball or like non-rev sports or whatever? Like, what do you do then? So I think it's just stupid, and people, they should stay put. The league's not great. We can all be honest about that. But I think, when the shoe drops with Clemson and Florida State or whatever happens there may be opportunities. Memphis, USF, Tulane would be on the short list for the ACC if the ACC still exists. There's probably some sort of a better version of the American out of the leftovers of that. Let's say Georgia Tech, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, and Clemson, and whoever else, Florida State, leave. The leftover there would still be better than the American right now if you had like Syracuse and BC and Virginia Tech or whatever. So like, now Virginia Tech would probably be gone too in that scenario. But anyways, you have a better league than the American right now. So like, you're better off maybe waiting to see if that plays out, or if even just two of those teams leave and it plays out. I just think all of this is really stupid. We've got to such a stupid part of college football and college sports, and we've gotten so far away from what people love, which is rivalries and regionalism. And like Memphis and Louisville should be in a league together, playing each other in sports. Like USF and UCF should be playing each other every year in every sport. Like, this is stupid, and it's bad for business long term for them not to be playing each other. And hopefully that's where maybe like this starts to sort itself out. And I think TV money is going to dry up a little bit here as more and more people cut the cord and start to really kind of a la carte pick up what they want in terms of coverage. And that's where I think it'll get more interesting too, because the thing I'm waiting, here's the shoe that I wait for, right? And this is not timely because Vanderbilt just beat Alabama in football, but when Vanderbilt and Mississippi State are drawing the same thing as Alabama and Georgia are, and the pie shrinking, who do you think they're going to tell to take a hike? It's not going to be the Auburns, the Georgias, the Floridas, the ones that generate the income. It's going to be Mississippi State and Vanderbilt and maybe Missouri and those teams. And that's where they have to start to figure this things out, because if you get to that point, it's going to get really ugly.
Yeah, I've want to wake up and go, why are we sharing our money with Vanderbilt or Mississippi State? Or
yeah, and why is it an even share?
Right, like there's got to be some uneven distribution.
And we know who's going to lead the cause. It's going to be Texas, because they blew up the Big 12. Like, and I say that as my parents are Texas alums. I grew up watching Longhorns. Spent my summers in Austin, but they'll be the first ones in there marching, complaining about money when it comes down to, if that pie starts going down, they're going to be the first ones in Greg Sankey's office raising hell.
Yeah, and I think you're also, about Memphis and Louisville belonging together. But I tell people all the time, yes, Memphis and Louisville belong together. But that doesn't mean Memphis or Louisville should be playing a conference, or we'll say U Cincinnati, right? Like that's the ridiculous part of the rivalries. So Kelly, tell everybody how they can keep up with the Bulls this week as we get ready for the game.
Bullsinsider.com is our website. USF_rivals is our X handle. And we're doing what we can. There's not really much going on this week. They did one Zoom with Golish today because the team's in Orlando and kind of under wraps as the weather goes on. Campus is closed and everything. So hopefully there'll be more kind of going on later in the week. But my gut feeling is not great about this. And having talked to all of my friends who live in Florida who are all amateur meteorologists, they're not feeling great about it either. So it's tough, man. I just feel like both teams are going to be looking for somebody else to play in their bye weeks because their bye weeks don't even line up either. So we've all seen this, whatever it was in 17 start to crop up. So we'll see if who else gets impacted by this and if there's like some weird makeup games. It would be ironic if like USF and UCF had to play or something weird coming out of all of this since that got canceled, that series with the move up by UCF to Big 12. But I don't know, man. I just, let's hope they play. But hopefully just my biggest hope right now is just the storm doesn't, hurt people in Tampa really bad. And I think football is sort of a secondary concern.
Kelly, thanks so much for taking time out, and you and your friends and family all try to stay safe for us.
Thanks, guys. Be good.
Thank you, Kelly.
Kelly Quinlan from Bulls Insider, USF's rival site. All right, well, we are going to act like I'm kind of in Kelly's camp. I don't really know how or why we're playing this game. I do think that if Memphis is 4-1 and USF is 4-1, I think that adds some importance and some levity to this game. But you've got one team really struggling and just really banged up, and you've got another team that and here's the truth: Memphis wants to play. My folks tell me Memphis pushed to play Friday. They offered to try to help get the game moved to Birmingham, Tallahassee, Memphis. And USF would really, as Kelly said, really rather honestly not play this game because of their injury situation. They really could use another week because, man, they took it on the chin at Tulane last week. That we have a game on Saturday afternoon at 2:30. Brian, let's get into it.
Prediction time.
Well, give us your thoughts about the game, and then we'll do predictions.
I think it would be it's if they play, it would be a game that Memphis, I think, is really up to playing. I think the players, I just have a sense that they want to get this bad taste out of their mouth. They need a game that they can dominate. And when you see a wounded animal like USF, I think Memphis can capitalize. And I think that's why you see Memphis really trying to get this game in, because they see that USF is not 100%, and this is another chance for Memphis to get right. And I kind of do hope that they do play, because I want to see Memphis have a bounce back game. I want to see them not be lethargic on offense and dominant on defense. And I sense that if they do play, that's what we might see. Because if USF was healthy, this might be, a game that Memphis does not want to play. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see if they do play. But yeah, I think Memphis is just itching to get at this game.
Sam?
I mean, yeah, bigger picture, Brian's got it. This game for Memphis, they're doing everything they can to get this game played, right? Especially with as big of expectations as the squad has. It's like coming off that Navy game, you feel dejected, and then you're looking for a get right, and then you kind of have this lackadaisical game against MTSU, and you have a bye week, so everything sets up perfect to go against this USF squad that just isn't ready. You know what I mean? And then another important factor is USF is in Orlando. How's their practice schedules going? Are they, assuming this game gets played, like what's they're going to be out of sorts and injured. So I feel like this is a really good spot for Memphis.
All right, so let's see, 2:30, 3 hours, 15 minutes. That's what, 5:45 p.m. They will look up at that, what is it, the big sombrero at the Raymond James Stadium scoreboard, and it will say, Brian Moss.
It was, and now preseason I wrote down it would have been 35-28 Memphis, but because South Florida is injured, and I really do think that Memphis is hungry. I see Memphis winning 42-17. I really think that this is a game that, things will come together. I don't, when players see their coaching staff and their admin doing everything they can not to play the game, I think psychologically it does something to them. And, I can see South Florida coming out in this game, being, thinking that they would rather be 100 different places except this game. And Memphis really wants this game. They need that game, and I think they're going to be laser focused. And that's why I say, what did I say, 42-17? So yeah, so 42-17 Memphis.
Sam?
I've got 28-10 Memphis. I think, of course, it could happen, right? This team has all the pieces, Memphis, to go off and have the 40-plus point game that you've been looking for a while, right? But it feels like wishful thinking. Like I've seen what I've seen out of this offense. Sure, they had the 40 against North Alabama and all that, but I feel like I've seen what I've seen in the South Florida defense. While injured, they're not a bad defense. So 28, modest, a lot, I'm not sure. And then the 10 points, I think South Florida's all out of sorts. I think the defense gets right. I think Memphis's attacking nature, and then the way Jordan Hankins coaches, how everything just goes downhill. And South Florida is just a good running team. I think, of course, the running part of Navy's offense hurt Memphis really bad. But I think this is a lot different than that. And especially with the backup quarterback, I don't think it matters whether it's Byron Brown or the backup. I think Memphis really, really bothers South Florida. Memphis's defense bothers South Florida's offense. I think they have a tough time getting moving. So I say 28-10.
I think this is going to be one of those games where it's 38-7, 38, 31-10, 31-3 going into the fourth quarter, and ends up 38-20 or something like that, because I think Memphis kind of calls the dogs off. But Brian, you're right. This, I'll say 38-20. I think that, this is a game where Memphis wants to play. South Florida, not only do they not want to play, but I'm sure a lot of their players are from that area. So they're going to have a lot bigger, as Kelly said, there's a lot bigger things than football on their mind. But I'll be honest, ultimately, I don't think the game gets played unless something major changes, because the airport is closed. How does Memphis get in? Is Memphis forced to fly in Saturday, Friday night late for the game on Saturday early afternoon, or are they forced to fly in Saturday morning? Like, we don't know how any of that works. I think by Thursday we will have a very clear picture. Once landfall is happening or happens, and we see where that's at, and we see what the storm surge looks like and what the infrastructure. Right now, if you made me a betting man, I would say it's 80-20. This game does not get played. And if it doesn't get played, there's nowhere else without moving other games around to play this game, because both teams are out of both their bye weeks. So,
Yep.
That's the other thought process. Again, I think if Memphis is 5-0 and South Florida is 4-1, I think that it changes the landscape. But Memphis is sitting at 4-1 in the league. They're 2-3 overall, so they're almost certainly out of the playoff picture, unless they go on a run. But then the other side of it is, guys, these games always scare me a little bit, because it could be the old, let's do it for Tampa. Let's do it for our city. We've been battered in 12 days by two major hurricanes. And we need this to come together as a city, and let's go get it. And Memphis comes out a little lethargic. I think the only way Memphis loses this game are a lot of mistakes, turnovers, and again, I talk about it all the time, but it's not just turnovers, right? It's when turnovers occur. If you throw
Yeah.
an interception going in and you throw it at their 25, that's one thing entirely. But if you're backed up on your 5 and you fumble or throw an interception, story. So, Sam, you can come join us anytime. We appreciate you filling in for Larry tonight, and appreciate you covering all the games with me, and adding your expertise to our team here.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. For Brian Moss, the best co-host in all the land, and Sam Shoemaker, John Maddox signing off. We will see everybody next week. Thanks for tuning in to Tigers Tonight.